As a kid growing up in the suburbs, I never had a whole lot to do in my hometown. There was a strip mall about a 30-minute walk down the road, one direction from my house, and the community pool about the same distance going the other way. Needless to say, I spent a lot of time pestering my parents, telling them I was bored or asking for rides somewhere. If I had a dime for every time I did this, I probably could have afforded to buy my own car at a very young age and explore the country myself. But my issue with the suburbs doesn't just end with being a bored and hyperactive child. It has a lot more to do with how American infrastructure is designed to accommodate cars instead of people. When I came to this realization, it kind of left me wanting more out of American cities and towns, somewhere where cars weren't a necessity, but an option. A lot of us have become so accustomed to car-based infrastructure in the States that we've become oblivious or maybe even willfully ignorant to a lot of the downsides that car-dependent infrastructure brings to our daily lives. Traffic-related fatalities are the 12th leading cause of death of Americans, a number 3 times higher than homicides. The EPA estimates that 27% of our annual carbon emissions come from the transportation sector. It's the highest of all our economic sectors. And the average American family spends $7,000 every year on gas and insurance, and that's not even taking into account the extra $9,000 that it takes to maintain a car throughout the course of its life. These are all uniquely American problems. So initially, when I was trying to find out what the reason was behind America being such an unsafe country to drive in, I thought it might have to do with population density, perhaps. The most dense cities were going to be the most dangerous to drive in. So I ran some numbers. I found traffic fatalities per capita for a number of states and cities, and the population density for each, and I did not find much of a correlation between these two factors. In fact, there may even be some evidence leaning in the opposite direction. For example, Baton Rouge, Louisiana was one of the more dangerous cities that I found. Louisiana as a whole, the most dangerous single-handedly out of the 21 states, cities, and countries I picked. 21 out of every 100,000 people living in Louisiana are going to die in a car accident. It's a startling statistic, right? It's a lot, and it's not that much higher than the national average. So if it doesn't have anything to do with population density, maybe it's more number of registered drivers per capita. So I ran the numbers again, and I did find a solid correlation between these two. Nothing for certain, but definitely much stronger. Out of the 21 cities, countries, and states I picked, the top 8 most dangerous places to drive out of my data set were all American. The only 2 not breaking the top 10 were Richmond, which came in about halfway, middle point, pretty safe, and New York City, which defied my population density argument, was actually one of the safest I analyzed, coming in at around 19. But there's only so much praise I can give to New York City, considering it's the 3rd highest polluted city in the country, or in the world. Remember that 27% I mentioned earlier? The amount of carbon that comes from our transportation sector? That's 1 billion tons of carbon every year. That's 6 times higher than the Netherlands' total carbon output, and about equal to France, Italy, and the UK's total carbon output combined. This graph details a comparison of the Netherlands and Pennsylvania's total carbon outputs, because they're relatively similar in population size. It's already a bit striking how much more of a pie belongs to Pennsylvania, but when you realize that the Netherlands has 5 million more residents than Pennsylvania, it becomes a bit more jarring, especially considering the transportation sections here. Remember, we spend $7,000 every year to pump these greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. When it comes to walkable cities, though, gas and insurance savings are not the only upside. There's a term in economics called accessibility, which can essentially be boiled down to the easier it is for someone to participate in the economy, the more likely they are to participate, and the more an economy can grow. For a little example, I want everyone to imagine there are 2 taco stands having their grand opening on the same day. One of them is right across the street here on Broad Street. You can get a taco anytime you're on campus. It's convenient and it's easy. Another one is opening in a small, quaint little town in Missouri called Devil's Elbow, population about 200 people. Show of hands, who thinks they're going to want to make the 13-hour drive out to Devil's Elbow to get a taco? Yeah, not one. I wouldn't either. I don't blame you. See, this is a bit of a vast over-exaggeration of the issue at hand, but I'm sure most of us have experienced this in our day-to-day lives. For example, back in my hometown, there were maybe just a small handful of burger joints where I lived. One of them was in that little strip mall I mentioned earlier. It was about a 2-minute drive away. My family and I would go there every couple months or so because it was the most convenient and easiest place to get a burger. Thing about this place, though, is it's kind of terrible. Like, really, really not good. One Yelp reviewer lovingly stated, it's an excellent place if you're looking for a bad experience. Thing is, we were looking for a bad experience because who wants to drive 30 minutes to get a burger that's maybe subpar at best? There was not great food where we lived. So the point I'm trying to make is that in Richmond, there's a burger place on every corner. There's some new food to try. There's a small business that can open. These were all things that we didn't have in my hometown. In Richmond, there are places to gather. There's arts and music, community organizations. There are ways to get involved with the people around you. This was not really a thing back where I lived. Even though Richmond is no pedestrian utopia, and in fact can even be kind of dangerous, I know my palms sweat every time I'm driving around here, it still leagues better because at least there's a sense of community. I haven't met easily 90% of my neighbors back in my hometown. Easily 90%. Isn't that kind of sad? In Richmond, I'm talking to new people every day. It's wonderful. When you realize that walkable cities are directly linked to better mental health, better overall health of the public, and higher economic growth, it's no wonder that the Netherlands is the 5th happiest country in the world. This takes me to an example of what we could be following. Amsterdam. Amsterdam has expansive public transit, bike paths that span through the entire city. It's a city that's made for pedestrians. If you take a comparison of the maps of Chicago public transit and Amsterdam's public transit, you'll realize you cannot get anywhere in Chicago via bus or metro. In Amsterdam, you can get anywhere you want to go, and this includes the suburbs. They can take you in and out of the city, around the city, from suburb to suburb, part of city to part of city, anywhere, literally anywhere. This is not anything you can find in America. It's time for the United States to catch up. We need to start developing our cities with people in mind and not vehicles. And when that day comes, maybe we can finally be a contender for one of the happiest nations in the world. Thank you.